So tell me if this sounds familiar, okay? So the alarm goes off. Usually it's your phone. It's blaring. That's sonar if you've got an iPhone. You scroll your email real quickly to see what disaster awaits you. Maybe you hit the snooze button once, 10 times maybe. You get up, you take a shower, you rush downstairs, you eat a hurried breakfast. If you've got kids, you start slamming peanut butter and jelly sandwiches together. Or Lunchables, what a great creation. You just take them out of the fridge, stick them in the lunchbox. You hug the kids. If you got to race them to 5 different schools, you do that. You get into the office and you're just bombarded with virtual meeting after chaos, after problem, after virtual meeting, after phone call. You get home, again, if you've got kids, then the extracurricular activities start. So you grab the kids, you start running them to baseball and softball and basketball and all the things, all the while maybe possibly scrolling email, taking your laptop with you, working at the ball field, working in the car. I've done that, take the laptop, work in the truck while they're on the soccer field, that kind of thing. If you're a college student, this is, class after class after class. And then, you get home and everybody, again, college students, kids, whatever, then you start the homework routine and it's the fight to get the stuff done and get the clothes laid out. And then everyone lays their head down on the pillow, and then you do the next thing the same way again the next day until you die. And this has become the pattern of life. And surprisingly, there are way more of us that live that way than we like to admit. And don't raise your hand and don't start elbowing somebody, but this has become life. This has become normal American life for us. But listen, there is another way. There is something else that your life could look like. And if you're stuck there, have no fear, okay? We're going to recognize that, we're going to own that, and then hopefully over the next 5 weeks, we're going to talk about how to get out of there. But hold that thought for a second, because this is a brand new series called Feel the Burnout. And you're going to be able to follow along with us. If you can't be here every Sunday, you'll be able to follow along with us at tcat.church/burnout. At this website right now, you'll see an image of the series, and then there's a button that says Take the Burnout Survey. I'd love for you to do that. Not now. Okay, do it later. Get your phone out. You can do it really quick. You can plug in your stuff. Let me know how it's going for your life. It's all anonymous, but it just gives us a window. It gives us a picture to relate. And I'll share some stats as we go along through this series about where we are, what we've done, and kind of what life feels like. But let's just be honest, okay? In this cultural moment we find ourselves in, all of us, we feel like we're surviving, not thriving. Is this fair? I mean, it doesn't feel anymore. Maybe early on, maybe right out of college, you were the kid who was just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you went to the first day of the job. You got there, you got up early, ironed every inch of your clothes, you laid out all your stuff in order, you had your briefcase filled, and now all of a sudden you find yourself throwing on whatever's just left that's still clean, that's not in the hamper. You don't really care. You put your hair up in a bun, you slick it back, whatever, and then off to work you go. Or, we're just bouncing from one thing to another to another. We find ourselves saying we'll just got to keep it together until, right? I just got to keep it together through the semester. If I can just get through the semester, I know it took a heavy course load, but if I can just get through the semester, keep it together until it's over, everything will be fine. I just got to get through this. I just got to get through this school year. The kids are busy this year, and I can just get through this school year, everything will be fine. If I can just get through this project at work, if I can just hold it together until this project at work is over, everything will be fine. If I just hold it together until. And we find ourselves saying this statement over and over and over again. The problem is when that season ends, there's another one, right? If I can just hold it together through softball season, if I can just hold it together through volleyball season, if I can just hold it together through this project, then that project, if I can just hold it together through this class, through this semester. And look, you're nodding heads because this is a very common thing. Okay, this is where we all find ourselves. And the truth is, this isn't the only thing that leads to burnout, okay? Let's just be honest for a minute. Both overwork and underwork rob us of the capacity to enjoy God and His world. You were built to work, but you were built to understand work in a very specific way. You were built to do things. You were built by a creator who works. And work was a beautiful thing. But what we've done in this world, and it's not just work, it's lots of different things, but what we've done is we've made tasks more important than life. And both overwork and underwork will rob you of joy. And everybody's feeling it. Everybody's feeling it. In fact, it feels like the world is kind of coming apart at the seams. It's like when I take my kids to the park and they want to go on the merry-go-round, at least when they were younger. My older ones don't do it anymore. The merry-go-round, you get on it and they're like, faster, daddy, faster, until someone starts going, ha, 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 and then they scream, and then somebody shoots out the side and lands on the mulch like 10 feet away. Usually they say, let's do it again. But it feels like that is what the world is doing. It's like, faster, faster. And then oh no, what have we done? And it feels like the world is coming apart at the seams. Do you know that in America, we spend $250 billion a year on prescription medication? You know what the top two are? So second place, second most popular medication in the United States is antidepressants. Followed, only number one, by the way, is anti-cholesterol medication. So cholesterol medication and antidepressants, number one and number two in our country, $250 billion. But here's what's weird. Since 1950, the per capita income in our country has increased threefold, 3 times more money now than we were making in 1950. The size of the average American household has gone up over 1,000 square feet over the past 20 years. So we have more than we've ever had before, but we're also less happy than we've ever been. We're more miserable than we've ever been as a country. That's not a Christian thing, that's a thing. Go look up the stats for yourself. We have more, we've gained more, we've done more than we've ever done before, and yet we're miserable. Something's not right. It feels again like the world is kind of coming apart at the seams, and none of us know how to make it stop. None of us know how to make it kind of quit. I love this quote by Albert Herschel. He says this: "There is happiness in the love of labor, but there is misery in the love of gain." And somehow, some way, we've gotten to this cultural moment where we all find ourselves needing more, right? Because now we're in a place where milk is $5 a gallon and so is gas, right? And you may be making more money than you've ever made before, but it's not quite paying the bills. And so now you find yourself overwhelmed, right? We're completely overwhelmed with maybe debt, or overwhelmed with work, or overwhelmed with family stuff, or overwhelmed with marriage stuff. You're overcommitted. You find yourself like you're plugged into a million things. You've had a hard time saying no. Your kids have said yes to some things, and maybe if you're like me, we've got a rule in our house that our kids participate in like one thing apiece, but now that I got 4 of them, all of them are in one thing apiece, and it's 4 different things, and we find ourselves overcommitted. Like one of the things we do every week, Shane and I have to sit down on Sunday night and go, okay, who's taking them to gymnastics, who's going to bowling, who's going to, and like it's like flight control, and 60% of our conversations now are flight control. You find yourself overexposed. This is 2 things, okay? Your world is in a fishbowl because it's all on social media, because everybody else's life is on social media. And so you find yourself having to keep up with all of these people who seem to be putting it together, but you're struggling. And the filters just aren't quite cutting it anymore. And then you do this thing, because I do this thing. You look and you're like, oh my gosh, why are they so happy? Like, look at their family. They look so awesome. They've got it all put together. Their kids look happy, and they've made it to all the things. And look, she's drinking a protein shake while she's at the soccer field, and she's wearing that cute shirt. And look at that. It's just awesome. How are they doing that? So our lives are more exposed than they've ever been before. We're over, more. And most of us, many of us, have gotten to a place where we just can't do it anymore. And we're emotionally and physically spent. And there's a word for it that we've created in this cultural moment, and it's burnout. You burn out. It's just like, I'm out. I'm done. I don't care. You find here's the textbook definition, because we have to have one of these now. The textbook definition of burnout is physical, emotional, or mental exhaustion accompanied by decreased motivation, lowered performance, and negative attitudes towards oneself and others. You know, that coworker you just can't stand. They keep burning popcorn in the break room, right? Or they say that thing, they have that word they say all the time, and it just drives you nuts, right? Or they don't do their work, and you find yourself doing your work and their work. Or college students, you're in that group project, and you're the only one doing anything, and you got 7 other classes besides this one, and you just can't seem to get over it, and those people are absolutely driving you insane. And then you find yourself asking those questions about yourself, like, why did I put myself in this? I guess I just don't have what it takes. I guess I just can't cut it. And it's all of this emotional and physical exhaustion. And look, I wish I could say it was an isolated thing, but it's not. In this very church, 100% of the people in this church that took my burnout survey said they are or have experienced burnout. 100%. That should make us stand up and think about it. Now, arguably, you could say, well, this is just something that's happening now. Like, that was one of the things that I thought when I first started researching a couple of months ago. This is a new thing. The word burnout is definitely a new thing. But this is something that's been going on for a long time. In fact, there's several biblical examples of this. My favorite, because I'm an Old Testament nerd, comes from the Old Testament. There's a story really quickly of the prophet Elijah. And Elijah has just had this encounter with these Baal worshiping prophets. And he had this really cool God shows up moment where he built this pillar of wood and he asked the Baal prophets to come down and set it on fire if their God was real, and it couldn't happen. And so then he says, well, the Lord Yahweh will do this. And he sets the pillar on fire and it burns it all up. They dump water on it. It's wicked all the water away. But then it also took out all the Baal prophets. They were horrible people, okay? They were sacrificing babies. It was a terrible, horrible thing. But then Elijah has ticked off the whole town. And so they start chasing him, and he's afraid for his life. And that's where this story picks up. Listen to this from 1 Kings. Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. And when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Now, he went into the wilderness of Shur, which is where Mount Sinai is. Okay, this is like a really cool moment where he goes back to the mountain of God. And eventually there's this confrontation that happens between him and God where he shows him that he's in this still small voice after he gives him a nap and a snack, which is a big deal, okay? But listen to what happens to Elijah at this moment. He's been running. He's afraid for his life. He's been overworked. He's been doing the same thing over and over again. And look, he was called to do it. It was his call. But listen to how he describes where he's at. He came to a broom bush, sat down underneath of it, prayed that he might die. I've had enough. Lord, Yahweh, he said, take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Now look, I'm not a trained professional therapist, but I think if someone walked into my office and said this, I would say, you've got some stuff going on. Elijah was burnt out. He was depressed. He was emotionally exhausted. He was physically exhausted. Again, God gives him a nap and a snack, and that's a really big deal. And then he comes and gives him a new pathway for the way his life was supposed to look. And we're going to get there a little bit later, but maybe you find yourself in this place. Maybe you've thought these words. Maybe you've said these words. I know that this moment seems so heavy and life seems so difficult for some of us. And you're like, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to get out of this mess that I'm in. I find that sometimes it helps to figure out how we got here, because the truth is, here's the thing, you can get out. See, God has a pathway out of this feeling and this tense and this difficult moment you might find yourself in. Okay? God has a pathway. But we got to talk about the pathway that got you where you are. And so over the past couple of months, I've been researching this and thinking about it, and I've come up with what I call the burnout pathway. And in interviewing some of you and listening and hearing your stories, it seems like no matter whether this was work-related or kid-related or family-related, your burnout got you here through these same steps. And so I'm calling it, again, the burnout pathway. And step number one is high expectations. You, at one time in your life, and look, high expectations aren't bad. You can't grow. Stress is actually a good thing. You can't actually grow unless you stretch yourself and stress yourself and set some high expectations to reach the bar. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you either created your own felt high expectations. You come into the semester, right, as a college student, I'm going to get straight A's this semester. I'm taking the hardest classes. I'm in the core of my degree. I'm going to study. I'm going to leave myself in the library. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to get through this because I'm going to take extra classes so I can take the summer off. You set these expectations. Or I was a first-gen college student, and so when I went into my first year, I felt the expectation of my parents worked really hard to get me here, right? And I'm the first one in my family to ever make it to college, and so I got to carry this. I got to do this, and I got to do it for them because they're all back home on the farm waiting for me to come back with this great degree. And so you get these high expectations. Whether you feel them or created them, you find yourself with these high expectations, and that's where it started. And the next thing that happened was chronic stress. Again, stress isn't a bad thing. This is what you do when you work out, right? You stress your body, you push it to the max so you can grow muscles and build resilience. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about constant, 24-hour a day, 7-day a week stress, chronic, continual stress that cannot be overcome, right? This is, again, if you think about this for a minute, jobs, people in work, okay? Maybe your expectations when you got to work is, look, the workload is short, you're blue-collar worker, and they're giving you 5 jobs to do. And you got to do your job for production and their job for production. You got to keep it all together. Maybe you're in an office and there's a project and you feel this weight from, like the economy's bad and I got to keep this job open. Maybe you're going at home, I have to have this job because I'm the breadwinner. And they're putting expectations on me and there's nothing I can do about it. I have to keep this job because I have to pay the bills, and so we just have to do it. And you find yourself pushing and pushing, and sooner or later you start taking on extra shifts or extra work because it has to be done. And sooner or later, you're thinking this is going to help you climb the ladder or help you take a step. It's just never really happened. And so you're in this perpetual state of stress, right? Where it's just not going away. And you work harder than you've ever worked before, but your production level seems like it's not super great. And you study harder than you've ever studied before, but for some reason you just can't remember. And you find yourself just pushing and pushing and pushing in this mode of, like, how am I going to figure this out? And then the next thing that happens is your personal care, you neglect yourself. Your health starts to take a tank. And again, there's a couple of different things for this. If you're a blue-collar worker, maybe you don't have access to health care. Maybe your health insurance is just too expensive and you can't go to the doctor. Or, your job just breaks you down, right? You work really hard and you just work your body to the bone. If you work in an office, right, you find yourself working through work so you can try to get things done and caught up. You order McDonald's one too many times in the week, And then here's the thing as parents, you do that thing where you get home and you're so exhausted, you just wait until everybody eats cereal before you go to sleep so you don't have to cook. Don't laugh. You've done that, okay? We've done that in our house. Like, my wife and I were talking about the other day, if we just wait long enough, they'll just eat cereal. It'll be fine, okay? But you do that thing where it's like, you don't eat quite right. You stop going to the gym. You stop your devotional time in the morning because you just don't have enough time, right? And you're not taking care of your body. You're not taking care of your soul because you just don't have the time. You're hurrying from one thing to the other. If you're a college student, you're living on Red Bull, or Monster, coffee. My college, there was this place called Ovid's. I feel like my wife and I spent 80% of our time there. She studied, I didn't, but I drank lots of caffeine. But we just drank coffee all the time, right? As much caffeine as we can get in our bodies, right? And you just push and push and push and push, and your body starts to take a tank. But then all of a sudden, you find yourself in isolation. For a couple of reasons, okay? So one, let's just say, for instance, again, you're having to take extra work. And so you find yourself in your job, I don't have time to spend with friends. And by the time I get home, I don't really want to be with friends because I'm exhausted. And, maybe even start distancing from your family. You get home and they're going to ask you a million questions. The kids are going to run at you. The wife is going to have something to do. Your husband's going to have something that you have to do. There's going to be some conversation. And all you want to do is sit in your truck in the driveway and scroll Facebook and just zone out for a second. All you want to do is just veg out and watch Netflix until you can't veg out anymore, until you fall asleep. Right? Or college students, you make the decision, well, I'm working hard. The only way to get out of this hole is to keep going back to the library, and you start distancing yourselves from your family. You start distancing yourselves from your friends. You start distancing yourselves from church. Church becomes like third in the list of priorities because you're like, well, I got to do work, and then we got baseball, and we'll have time for a shower, but if we sleep in an hour and skip church, then I'll be able to. And so there's all this distance that starts getting created in your relationships. And then you get to a place eventually where life just isn't fun anymore. The things that you're doing just don't bring you satisfaction the way they used to. Your job, right? You used to get up early, you iron your clothes and you pack your briefcase and you were so stoked to get in the office, and now you're like, do I have to go back again? Right? And the boss is pressing you because your production levels dropped and things just aren't working out the way they used to, and you feel this stress, like I have to have this job, I have to keep this going. And so then again, all these things sometimes they happen linearly, but sometimes they just kind of happen over and over again. And life just doesn't bring any satisfaction anymore. You wake up every day going, do I have to do this again? And maybe eventually you get to a place where you say those words that Elijah said, right? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Do I really want to live like this anymore? And that, my friends, is where you get to a place of extreme burnout. And this is it. This is what happened. And you can fill in the blanks with your own story. And look, stay-at-home parents, like, you may not have a job at all, but guess what? You get this, right? Because they're like, she's a stay-at-home mom, and she homeschools their kids, and they seem to be like in direct order, and I can do this too. I'm going to be the best. Like my spouse is working really hard at the office, and so I'm going to keep the house clean. We're going to have the cleanest house in the neighborhood. We're going to have the smartest kids. I'm going to homeschool them. We're going to get them to all their things. High expectations that leads to, listen, kids are kids, and the next thing you know, your house looks like a bomb went off in it. Right? And then you stop taking care of yourself because, you can't. There was this episode of Bluey the other day. This is so real. There was an episode of Bluey on in our house the other day where the dad gets home from work, and the mom looks at him and goes, I need 20 minutes where no one says anything to me. Right? Have you been that? Right? Okay? I just need 20 minutes where no one says anything to me. But that's self-care. But maybe you're not even doing that anymore. And then you find yourself going, I don't have time to go to the gym and meet people. I don't have time to go out. I don't even feel like going out and seeing my friends anymore. Then you're like, why am I even a stay-at-home parent? Why did I do this to myself? This is silly. I'll just go back to work. We'll put the kids in daycare. Somebody else can handle them, right? And then you find yourself burnt out. Like, well, now I feel like a terrible parent. I feel like a terrible spouse. I feel like this is the pathway. This is what's happening in our country over and over and over. This is what's happening in your house over and over and over. And there's got to be a better way, right? All of us want a better way. There's got to be something better than this. And the beautiful thing is, God talked about this. Now, maybe he didn't use this language, and maybe this kind of burnout that exists in our country today didn't really exist in first century. But listen, Jesus knew of our propensity to get here. And in fact, centuries ago, Jesus, to a crowd of people, sensing that they were trying to figure out how life was supposed to work, and sensing that eventually there'd be a cultural moment like what we find ourselves in right now. He says something to a crowd of people, but like when you read the words, it's obvious he's not just talking to them. And he's peering through the centuries, and he's looking right at you and me. And in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says these familiar but powerful words. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. Weary means like can't pick your feet up. It's just, and burden means not just like carrying something, but like carrying an impossible weight. That's what the original language means. So you're like stumbling, carrying a weight you cannot carry anymore, emotionally, physically, whatever. That life is just ground to a halt and you don't know what to do. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Again, it sounds beautiful, right? It sounds really pastoral, and you've probably heard these words before, and maybe as soon as this popped up, you rolled your eyes. Good news, I did too, the first time I read this. Because you think, oh, that sounds really preachery. And that sounds like, okay, great, right? Sure, I'll come to Jesus, he'll give me rest, but guess what? I still got to get up and go to work tomorrow, and the kids are still going to need lunches packed. And I get all of that, but this is where it gets really good, okay? This is where he's like, I'm not done. I don't want you to miss this. Listen to what he says next. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and will give you rest for your souls. Now, maybe you didn't grow up on a farm like I did, and you have no idea what the word yoke means, but I want to tell you what this means. So, like, literally, the word yoke, it's this. Look at this picture. And originally, I had this, like, Jamie had this upside down, so the horns were down just for you all, but I didn't want to do that today. So, this is an oxen yoke. These are two oxen. They're big oxes, not cows, okay? And this wooden thing in the middle is the yoke. And what would happen is, on a farm, they would take one really strong oxen, which in this picture is this one, and yoke it to a smaller one, but they were knotted together in a certain way so that the big one would carry some of the load, and the little one would walk beside him, but the load was getting carried like not evenly. Okay, and so this yoke was to put them together so they could walk together and get the work done, but not necessarily pull the same weight. All right, so that's the literal sense. So listen to this word again. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. So in one sense, but this is not the only sense, in one sense, Jesus is saying, look, let me walk beside you in this. I'm going to carry some of the weight. We're going to go together, and I am gentle and humble, and I get where you're at, and I want to walk with you. That's one sense, but like that's not even the best part, okay? The best part is the level that everybody else in the crowd understood that you don't, and I didn't really when I first read this either. Because yoke is not just, back up for me please, yoke is not just like in the literal sense the oxen thing, okay? When a rabbi, and Jesus was a rabbi in his time, I wonder what Jesus would have been if he came in this day, a Fortune 500 business owner or a teacher or a librarian. I mean, I don't know. But Jesus, in his culture, in his time, was a rabbi. And this word yoke was what rabbis would talk about their teaching. And so when people would become their disciples and follow behind them and listen, the yoke was like their way of life, the way they did things, the way they looked at the world, their perceptions, their perspectives, their decision-making process, their teaching. And so Jesus is saying to all of us, look, take my way of life upon you. Learn from me. This is why it's so beautiful. Learn from me. Look at how I look at the world. Look at how I understand things. Take my perspective and my learning. Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And so Jesus is saying with this like eloquent and beautiful voice, look, if you will just come to me and live life the way it's designed, because hey, guess what? I was there when you were built. If you just live into this life the way that I've designed it to be, and yeah, look, there's going to be people that are like, what are you doing? And how could you rearrange your life like this? And what are you thinking? But like if you'll just step into this way of doing life the way I do life, you will find rest for your souls. I love that he didn't just say body, right? Because it would have been easy to just say body, right? You can sit down and have a snack and rest on the couch, but that's not what he said. He said your souls, like that depth of that pain that you feel and that exhaustion that you feel, guess what? You will find rest For your souls. And then again, just so they didn't get it, just in case they didn't get it, he finishes up like this. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now here's the deal. And let's just own this together, okay? Because I'm a realist. You're a realist. You're realistic people. You live in a real world, not the fantasy world. And we love to create a bubble here and give you Jesus. But sooner or later, you're going to go back out the doors and live it out. Like, it sounds great, doesn't it? But you have no idea where to start. No idea what to do. Well, that's the whole point of the next 5 weeks is I'm going to give you a process to live into this. But I'm going to give you step one today. Okay? And I need to give you a little perspective shock in order to hear this. And let me just say something else. Some of what I'm going to be able to say, what I'm about to say may be hard for you to hear. Because you've been down this burnout path for so long that turning around seems impossible. But let's just put this in perspective for a second. What do you want? Which would you prefer to have? All right? Which of these two categories do you really want to live in? So there's the yoke of the world, which says do more, work more, earn more, medicate it, right? If it just starts breaking or starts falling apart, take a pill, just fake it. Now look, I want to say this really fast. Some of us need medication. I'm not downplaying that, all right? Some of us, there's chemical imbalances in our brains and there's things that are broken in our bodies, and I am not telling you at all to stop taking your medicine. That's not what I mean. But if you just find yourself in a place where you're like, I'll just take an Adderall so I can get through this study, I'll just take a pill so that I can make it through and keep myself awake. I'll just drink caffeine until I make it through. I can just get through, right? If I just hold it together until. And if you find yourself, again, let me just throw this one out there, substance abuse, I'll just drink until the voices go away. I'll just take this drug and then I'll be able to do it. Right, and these substances become abuse. This is what the world wants you to do. This is the yoke of the world. And I'm not trying to be one of those like fire, brimstone preacher guys. This is just reality, because nobody else cares about your soul. God's the only one leaning in, going, "This is not good for you," right? And I have no problem in saying I'm a capitalist and I live in a world of capitalism. Like, that's not what I mean. I'm talking about the reality that never will there be enough for you according to the world. Never. And then Jesus comes along and he says, the yoke of Jesus, he says, hey, let me help. Let me help. Learn my ways. Rest in my grace. I came and gave my life so that you wouldn't have this life. You got nothing to prove. Not to me. Jesus is like, look, you don't have to earn it. You don't have anything to prove to me. I know you. I've known you since you were born. I've known you before you were born. You got nothing to prove to me. You're good. You and I, we're good. And then I love this. I love it that Jesus said, walk with me. There were so many different times where, we talk about walking with Jesus, and I did a series a couple of years ago called Walk This Way. Like, he called his movement the way. And he said, walk with me, follow me. Not sprint with me, not hurry on to the next thing. Like, I never get a picture of Jesus sprinting in Scripture. And I'm not saying he wouldn't, all right? But I'm just saying, I never get this picture of Jesus like running and hurrying from one thing to the other. He just seems so calm and cool and collected. Look, Jesus dealt with some stressful stuff. These are difficult things to roll with, but I never got this picture of him fazed by it. And listen to me say this one more time. Stress is not a bad thing. Chronic stress is. And Jesus has something better in mind for your life than that. Because if we just put all this together for just a second, here's step one. All right, and this is the part you're not going to want to hear. This is the part that's going to be difficult for you. But if you want to get out of the burnout pathway, if you want to get yourself out of the mess that you find yourself in, there's step one. And this means you have to surrender to Jesus. You have to look at him not just as your Savior, because he'll keep rescuing you. I don't know if you do this. When I've been burnt out in the past, I find myself going, Jesus, you just have to take this weight. You have to save me, rescue me. And he will rescue you. But the truth is, I found myself back in that mess again because I wanted him to be my Savior and not my Lord. And that's the difficult thing, y'all. Part of being a Jesus follower is going, okay, I'm going to let you rescue me, but I'm also going to follow you so I don't get in that mess again. Because listen, when you surrender your life to Jesus, you also surrender the load of your life to Jesus. Take my yoke upon you, he says. Learn from me and my ways. My burden is light. I'm humble and gentle of heart. These are all the things Jesus is whispering into your life right now. And all this stuff, right? The thing is, I got a theory, okay, and this is, maybe you don't want to hear this either. But I think some of us as Christians, we try to blend Jesus' way of life and the world's way of life and put them together and try to hold it together, and we're on a merry-go-round and it's spinning, right? And we can feel our fingers slipping off the bars. And I still feel like there's a world in Jesus' way of thinking that you have a job and you're successful and you grow and you make money and you thrive and your family does things and still does sports and all the things. I'm not saying you got to become a monk and go live in a monastery. I just feel like Jesus has a different pace of life for you than you are willing to live right now. In some way, somehow, you have to get to a place where you say yes to Jesus and no to some other things. And that means when you surrender your life, and you're willing to surrender your life and go, okay, Jesus, you know better than me. You know better than me. And this is going to stink. And this is going to be hard. And it's going to mean some life change. It's going to mean some lifestyle change. But I can't do this anymore. And you never built me to do this anymore. And so I'm going to say yes to you and no to some other things. So that's step one. And if you can do that, then there is a world of hope on the other side of the burnout you find yourselves in right now. And we will pick up right there next Sunday in part 2 of Feel the Burnout. Will you let me pray for you? Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for these people that are here today. And God, I know that there are people in this room whose souls are weary. There are people listening to the sound of my voice whose souls are hurting and they are weary and they are downtrodden. And gosh, they need you. So God, would you just help them to start looking at their lives through the lens of your yoke and your way? Help them to start saying yes to you and maybe notice some other things so they can find balance and they can find hope and they can get out of the burnout that they find themselves in today. God, you have a way. You have a way. Help them to say yes to it today. Lord, we love you. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all so much for coming to TCAT today. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. See y'all next Sunday.